Friends, Romans, viewers, welcome to John Webster Film. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me today is my special guest, Nessie. I think you all know her. We're going to be talking about the first season of HBO's Rome. So how are you doing today, Nessie?
Well, I've crammed in a season of Rome in the last 24 hours, so my head is just exploding with names and places and series of events. But I needed a refresher. I'd watched it quite a few years ago when it was live, and then again on Blu-ray, and it holds up so well, even after rewatch.
Yeah.
Hi, Kitty. Kitty says hi. So yeah, just finishing up my rewatch, so I've got a lot of it really fresh in my mind.
Yeah, God, that reminds me of when we did the Watchmen stream on Here Be Dragons, and I'm pretty sure I jam-packed that whole show in like 24 hours, and that was a whirlwind. But no, it's been great revisiting this show because I haven't seen it in a number of years, and it's so good. There's
and there's quite a few familiar faces on there.
Yeah, there are. If people watch the show along with us, they might now get why some of us jumped up and down when people like Tobias Menzies and Indira Varma and Kieran Hines were announced for Game of Thrones, because we know them from this, and they had such a beautiful. And but yeah, so I guess we'll just start off first. Let's I'm going to say hi to a couple people in the chat, because and see, we have a couple people have showed up. We have Lady Leaf. Nice to see you. We have OTDA. They're very, very nice to see you. And of course, Steven's in the chat.
Of course, he's in the
chat. Great to see you, buddy. And I think, I know a couple other people are planning to show up. Hopefully we'll see them in a little bit. Nessie, just let's start off and just talk about, how did you come to the show first?
Well, it was recommended to me by a friend. And of course, I'm a big history buff, and that time period, the classical period, has always been like a fascinating time period for me. So to have a dramatic series that really just does a really great overview on that time in Roman history where the Republic is falling and the empire is forming, it's just a great time. Well, a very interesting time, we'll say, but it's chock full of great characters and historical figures. So it was like a no-brainer for me. So that's how I fell into it. How about you, John?
Yeah, I think I actually saw the first season not while it was airing, but shortly afterwards. I may have come by it, and I may have come by it by less reputable means, shall we say, because I don't think I had HBO at the time.
Oh, well, and I guess the DVDs hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, exactly. So the options were kind of limited, but I remember wanting to see the show because, well, first of all, I'm a huge history buff, but also at the time it was coming a few years after Band of Brothers, and when HBO was really getting this reputation for making cinema quality television shows, and I was just really excited to see something. Sorry, I don't have my phone on silent, so it just beeped.
It's okay. I've got a cat. I can't control her whereabouts, so we're on kind of even footing there.
But yeah, so I was really super psyched to get to watch another historical drama given the scope
Yes.
of this, and we'll talk about that more as we go on, because I think this was one of the first times that I realized how valuable telling a story, a cinematic story over the course of, in this case, 12 hours could really be, diving into the characters. And
yeah,
oh, good.
The longer season really does show in this, where they've in later years, like, for Game of Thrones, the last few seasons, they cut those number of episodes shorter, and I don't think it really does aid in the storytelling to give it that broader depth.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, though, I mean, speaking of sort of truncated seasons, I mean, obviously the second season of this show, which we're not going to talk about in this stream, but it was only 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Versus this 12. And I remember at the time being a little let down by that. And then when Game of Thrones was announced, it was also 10 episodes. And I'm like, no, give us a couple more. So I was kind of fighting for more episodes for Game of Thrones from the get-go. But I think they adapted well to the 10 episode format. But as for this first season of Rome, just what they were able to do with character arcs was just simply beautiful. And I guess I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and give an overview of the first season. Well, not so much an overview yet, because we'll get to certain plot details later on, but kind of give people an idea of what the show was.
Just set the stage.
Yeah, the story was very much about Rome in the days leading up to Julius Caesar taking control, and tells of the conflict between Caesar and Pompey Magnus, who essentially ruled Rome together. In real history, there was actually a third person. I'm afraid, shamefully, I don't have his name written down, but they were a triumvirate. But for the purposes of the show, they cut it down to just Caesar and Pompey, which was probably a good choice.
Right. They were the two main players anyway.
Yeah, so the show starts off telling about their conflict and how it eventually leads to war. And you have all these different... It's a great ensemble. They have a great cast of characters. The two primary characters, who we kind of see the story through their eyes. People with their names actually did exist in history, but they're largely fictionalized in the story. And their names are Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo, who are soldiers in what's called the 13th, which is a division of Caesar's army. And so they kind of stumble their way through history and find themselves in a lot of situations where they're right next to the action. So we get to see all this stuff from their point of view. And
they're like the original Duncan egg, if you want to coin a phrase there. They just stumble haphazardly, like they're just creatures of fortune and fate cast on the tides. They just you will never know where they will end up. They will always end up exactly where they need to be at the exact right time to make a huge difference. They're like this force of nature, so to speak, like a wild card thrown into the mix. And they're just great.
Funny because they often find themselves in precarious situations, but Caesar actually remarked several times throughout the season that he says those two have powerful gods on their sides. So he often helps them along just for the sake of not pissing any gods off, essentially.
Right. Yeah. He's like, I don't know about these two, but I'm not gonna cross them. I think we'll just go with it.
Yeah.
they go inside of got themselves out of so many scrapes that other men would have just been, Caesar would have just, had them done away with and wouldn't have thought twice about it. But they just always seem to land on their feet
And
or rise through their I don't know what's the word. They fail upwardly, maybe is the correct term.
yes.
Yeah.
And just want to pause for a second. I want to, say thank you guys for showing up. It's great to see so many faces. I see Danny.
Some new faces too.
Yeah, I know I saw Kate and Beth. I'm pretty sure I saw. Yep, and AK, she's in the chat.
AK's here.
Yeah,
good to see you.
So Flores the Fox, a lot of people. So thank you guys so much for showing up. We're really excited to get to talk about the show. But we were talking about. I want to mention the actors who play Vorenus and Pullo because they have actually really, they become recognizable in the years since, which has happened with a lot of actors on this show. The actors are Vorenus is played by Kevin McKidd, who I think a lot of people know from Grey's Anatomy. I haven't seen the show, but I know he was on that. And Ray Stevenson plays Titus Pullo. And the Star Wars geek in me feels compelled to say that they have actually both voiced characters on Star Wars Rebels. So, but yeah, and then we have Julius Caesar himself, who's played by Kieran Hines, who, of course, we all know as Mance Rayder from Game of Thrones. But here he is given so much to do. Obviously it's Caesar, so it's a wonderful character. And I was thinking about this watching the show this time around. He's sort of an enigma as portrayed in the show, because he's, in one sense, he's vicious and he's unmerciful, but he's also very charming when he needs to be.
Caesar puts the face forward that he needs to at the time. I think, like you're saying, John, you never meet the real Caesar unless who does he totally let his guard down to in his circle? I think Servilia was close, but even, he had to turn against her. So he really had no one that, he could be truly himself.
It's funny. I think he shows different aspects of himself with different people. I think he feels free to show his more ruthless side around Mark Antony.
Oh, yeah.
And even then, he'll kind of pass it off as I was, just not joking, but speaking lightly, and he'll pass it off with a smile. But then at other times he goes all in. There's a point later in the series where Mark Antony is, going on about how he's showing himself off to be the god Jupiter, and he makes the comment that he's pretending, and to which Caesar says, "I'm not pretending."
He was fully putting on all the trappings of power.
Yeah,
that was available to him.
I do want to spend some more time talking about Kieran Hines' performance, but since I have just mentioned Mark Antony, we really cannot, we can't not just jump into the glorious part of the show that is James Purefoy as Mark Antony.
Oh, he nailed this character. I can't see Mark Antony any other way, any other portrayal that we've had of him before or since. This guy is Mark Antony to me.
Yeah, this for me is, I always think of this as kind of a shame, because James Purefoy has not had another performance like this, or he hasn't had material like this since he played the role. And it's a shame, because
He's such a great actor.
He is so good in this because he's hilarious. He's vicious and frightening, and you never know what he's going to do at a moment's notice.
Oh, and sexy. Let's not forget that. I mean, the man. He's a nice tall drink of water there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the ladies will be pleased with a certain scene early on in the series, which, we'll just say that this show was an equal opportunity nudity show. So,
yes, lots of Italian sausage on display. We'll just see it there. But I love his relationship, his love-hate relationship with Atia. I love that. And she's such a cat. She is just a what can I say? She's quite the forerunner to Cersei Lannister. If you ever just love that. Can I say she's a bitch? My God, she is. But I love her in this role.
She's unbelievable. She's played by Polly Walker, and she is just quite simply one of the most entertaining and fascinating characters ever put on screen. And I think you kind of nailed it when she's a forerunner, when you say she's a forerunner of Cersei Lannister.
Quite a bit, yes.
Just
she wields that same type of soft power that Cersei does. That it's the female roles are, females in Rome or any in that type of society really didn't have actual power or authority or what have you. But they worked through other people, like the men in their family. So Atia is like the face of the Julii family while Caesar is away. So she is backdoor making deals behind the scenes, doing political maneuvering, all for the betterment and advancement of her family. I mean, nobody plays politics better than Atia, I think. She's got the game down.
And while it's a testament to, and I guess we should probably talk about the fact that in this show, a lot of the sort of background politics and power is wielded by the women in the story. But having said that, you still see the impact that, sort of societal restraint has on these characters, because I think all things being equal, if it wasn't for the fact that she's a woman, I think Atia would essentially be the one in charge. She
would have scratched and clawed her way right to the top. She has no problem using and disposing of people along the way. She is ruthless. She is, I love her.
Yeah, I mean, and just the fact that, you want to talk about comparisons to Cersei, the way she interacts with her children.
That is
particularly Octavian, who that poor kid never had a chance because has such an odd upbringing. Because the first time we see him, he's sort of timidly standing back while his mom's in the bathtub, and she just stands up in the nude and says, "Don't be a silly goose, come in." It's like, no.
Wait a second. Let's just say that there's a lot of boundary issues in this family.
Yeah.
It may be we zoom in on this particular family. We don't get to see a lot of how the other families in the series interact with one another. I should say of the aristocracy. we do see how the pleb family interacts with one another. Totally different than how the aristocrats are, and it's like the rules don't matter. We do what we wish, and
Yeah, and don't worry, Beth. We did discuss this. We won't be getting into season 2, but as we go along, we will be diving into story elements of this season. So, so if by chance you are planning on watching the show and you're spoiler adverse, just keep that in mind. We'll be getting more in depth as we go along. So speaking of dysfunctional family, so we have her children, Octavian and
Octavia.
Octavia, and poor Octavia, because she is
she's everybody's pawn.
She's used by pretty much everybody, and especially by her mother, who just does all these things to her that she says are for the good of the family.
For her own good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
early on in the series, she has an opportunity to marry Octavia off to Pompey, and she has Octavia divorce her then husband, and then gives Octavia to Pompey before there's even any kind of wedding. Of course, there isn't a wedding, which is even more horrific.
And she really cared for her husband, the man she was married to. It was really a loving arrangement, and they just crap all over that. Although
I do, it is kind of hilarious.
I gotta turn this cat out. Excuse me. Go ahead, John. I'm just going to turn the cat loose.
Yeah. So Atia has a way about the situation where she's forcing Octavia to leave her husband, and her reaction to it is she says, "Tears." The man actually had tears in his eyes.
Tears. Like she couldn't believe that.
Nobody wants a weakling for a husband.
No, not to have like real emotion for the person that you're married to. How uncivilized is that? Marriage is more of a political contract with these people. It's like who can gain advantage, who's making alliances, and it has nothing. Emotion doesn't enter into the picture. In fact, if there is emotion, it kind of gets in the way of things, because you may be married today in an alliance with, your two families, and the next year you could be on opposite sides of the fence, and having that emotional attachment just kind of gets in the way of things.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, certainly there is that there's some differences in the society, well, some major differences, but also I do think it says something about the bizarre relationship between mother and son. I just don't know that a normal mother would act in that way towards her son, even in Rome. So I don't know. I'm inclined to think that there's a bit of both there, Leaf. So, but no. So Octavia is played by Carrie Condon, who is a wonderful actress. She's in she's in the show Better Call Saul. And she's really good, but she's playing a character who does get manipulated by a lot of people. And it's just so unfortunate for her because it doesn't stop with her mother. She's later manipulated over the course of many years by Servilia, another character who we'll get into, who is just as ruthless as Atia.
If Atia is a Cersei Lannister preview, then Servilia is about as close to Olenna Tyrell, I think, as this series gets. She is, yes, she is very, very smart.
Yeah, and she puts on, and she's very good at putting on a performance.
Oh, yes.
Which is a very Olenna thing.
Very much so. Butter would not melt in this woman's mouth.
But I do want to devote some time to her, but we'll get to her in a little bit. I do want to talk some more about Octavian. He's played by Max Purkis, who was also in the film Master and Commander.
Yeah. And this is just one of his 2 roles. Isn't that right, John? He's only had these 2.
I mean, he may have done some other stuff, but I know I haven't seen him in many years. So I'm not sure what he's been up to, but he is utterly brilliant as Octavian. So much, I'll never mind. I was going to say something season 2 related as far as the cast, but we'll save that for next time.
Right. Season 1 is the education of Octavian is a way that I like to look at it, because you see him from a young man, a youth, who hasn't reached his majority yet. So he's still under he still comes under, his mother's sway, and has to, do what she says, whether he likes it or not. But she pushes him into and around powerful men. Tries to learn from these powerful men how to, be a proper Roman young man. So he learns from them. He's quiet, he's reserved, but he watches all the time and learns.
It's what they say, you should be worried about the quiet ones. And this is especially true for Octavian, because he has a violent streak and a ruthlessness underneath. And we see it as early as the first episode, where he's captured in Gaul, and as soon as he's freed, he bludgeons one of his captors to death. And it's cold, and it's, I think you're instilled with a bit of fear of him in that moment, because it's a young kid. He shouldn't be like that, but he's
only 11 or 12 in that scene, you know, and he is utterly ruthless, and it's like, oh my God, this kid's gonna be like killing cats before you know it, or something.
And of course, that is also the scene where he meets Vorenus and Pullo, and especially he forms a bond with Pullo as the series progresses. And Pullo is actually hired later on by Atia to train him,
to teach him the manly arts.
Yes.
But these are probably the first of people who are not slaves, that are outside of his class, that he's, come and, interacted with for any length of time. So I think, these people become very important to him in later episodes. So it's, like you say, they're in the right place at the right time, Yeah. And make.
So next, I want to talk about someone who's well, we'll kind of shift back towards Servilia and also her son, Brutus, who is played by the only Tobias Menzies. And see, this is the thing. Whenever I feel like there were people who knew about Tobias when he was cast as Edmure in Game of Thrones. People who knew him from this and people who didn't quite know who he was. And there was definitely a divide in excitement because I think you have to have seen Rome to fully get why a lot of people were super excited. And I feel like even if he didn't get that much to do in Game of Thrones, he eventually got a wonderful part in Outlander, and he's been doing a number of other things. So it's been great to see his career kind of take off in the past several years. But this was the first time that I saw him in anything, and he just knocked it out of the park as Brutus, because this is a character who is very easy to just paint as a villain. Because, everybody knows that, Brutus is one who betrays Caesar. And so you can easily paint him with a broad brushstroke. But this is what I was talking about with this show. The fact that it's a story told over 12 episodes and you can get a lot of nuances in. And I think nowhere is that more relevant than the relationship between Caesar and Brutus, because
absolutely
there's this beautiful father-son relationship that you see, even though they're enemies. Enemies,
philosophical enemies.
Yeah, enemies and friends over different periods over the course of the story, because they're very close as the series opens up. They're family. And then, of course, Caesar kind of leaves Brutus in a difficult position when he's marching on the city, because Brutus has to make a choice between, does he go with his friend or does he fight for the Republic?
Right.
And, that's an impossible situation. And one can understand why Brutus made the choice that he did. And then the fact that Caesar seems so willing to forgive as the show carries on. So you do invest in their relationship, and it's heartbreaking when it breaks down.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does. I mean, you see the pain that Brutus goes through. He never wanted to be adversarial with Caesar. He never wanted that. In fact, I mean, he in the earlier episodes he tries his best, to resolve the political conflict between Caesar and Pompey, and to come to like a bloodless, some type of compromise that that will work. And of course, given the nature of things, that of course it didn't work. Of course it didn't. Then we'd have no show. But you see the anguish that he goes through, because this man was, in all essences, his father. He loves and respects and served with for many years. It was his ally, his political ally, and just loved him dearly. And I think even at the end, he still loved him. It wasn't that he ever really fell out of love, I guess, with Caesar, the man, but his political and moral compass just could not accept what the actions of his friend was doing. And you see the moment when it just breaks him.
Yeah, the spoiler alert. In the season ends with Caesar's assassination,
but it's brutal.
Yeah, and of course, Brutus is the one who strikes the final blow. And as you watch just the expression on both of their faces, it is so heartbreaking. And it's because so much is built up to that point. That's what I'm talking about with the development over the course of the season. Everything is poured into that moment of just pure anguish. And then after the deed's done, he's not, there's no satisfaction. There's certainly no joy.
No.
And his final moment in the season is just crying out in pain. And it's so good. It's it's horrible to witness, because it's like you don't really, it's just tragedy. There's no, like, you're not rooting for any one side, because Caesar is a dictator and he's a tyrant, and you're frightened of him, but the way that it's done is so despicable, and despite what they're trying to tell themselves, not honorable in the least bit.
Right.
And all you're left with is just this father-son relationship and that betrayal, and it's utterly heartbreaking. But stepping back a little bit, his mother is Servilia, who, as the show starts off, is deeply in love with Caesar. And this could not be a more polar opposite to where she ends up over the course of the season.
Right.
Because ultimately,
she waited 8 years for the man to come home.
And then he does, and there's happiness there. But then, of course, the devious Atia makes sure that everybody knows this is going on, because she's jealous.
Yeah.
Which, Atia jealous? That's so
I
shocking.
can't imagine that she's not the center of attention. I can't believe she would be upset by that.
But so, and when Caesar's wife finds out about this, she says, "End it, or it's divorce." And at that time, there was no way that Caesar could possibly divorce his wife when he was in the midst of trying to win a war and consolidate power.
Yeah, it was all over politics. That's one of those where emotions and feelings had to be thrown to the side because of the politics of the situation and the power struggle. So, yeah. Rip Servilia's heart.
Yeah, but shall we just say that Caesar did not go about the breakup in the best way?
No, I think he wanted to end it in such a way that maybe in his eye, oh, if she hates me, it'll be better for her because she won't be pining. Or, he really went out of his way to make her hate him. I think.
And I think he underestimates, the impact that's going to have. Even later on in the show, he says to Atia, "I have no doubt that she is not very fond of me, but wants to kill me." So he severely underestimates her. But what happens is,
she's just a woman.
Yeah, at first I was quite, I was certain that it was just sort of coldness on his part, but I think you're right in that I think he's making an effort to end it so that, in a way that he feels she can move on. But it's such it's such a horrible way, and it shows the lack of respect for women that the men had in the culture, that it's not enough for him to be cruel. He has to physically assault her, and it's just, that's like beyond being a horrific thing to do, just as far as he could not have possibly done anything worse in terms of planting the seeds of his own eventual demise.
Yeah, a woman scorned, as especially this one. She plotted and planned his downfall from that moment. it wasn't it wasn't enough that, you know, he just, okay, we're done here. I can hate you from a distance. No. She had to not only bring him down, but his whole family in any way, shape that she could. That one scene, John, and I think you know the one where that I'm talking about, where she's invoking the gods for, you know, the Furies. I think it was. She was calling the Furies.
I curse Gaius Julius Caesar, and it's something about may his penis rot or something.
Wither on the stem. It's like, yeah, any way that she could cause, you know, curse him, you know, anything about him, his power, his masculinity, everything that makes Caesar Caesar. It's like, yeah, buddy, yeah.
And of course, she curses Atia as well.
Oh yeah, well, the whole family.
Yeah. God.
And I'm just like, I got chills. I got chills when I was watching that scene, because you could feel the hatred pouring off of her as she's just in that scene, just stabbing and scratching and just taking out all of her anger on that that metallic scroll. I think she was, you know, imbuing with her curse. Yeah, it's just awesome.
Yeah, and she goes to extreme lengths to pursue her revenge. One thing that I do want to speak about, because I don't think I got this as I was watching the show originally, and I was thinking about this because obviously the second season, no plot details, but it spans a significant length of time, so that there's so that years pass over the course of episodes and in between episodes. And I was surprised that actually that happens quite a bit in this first season too, in terms of large periods of time. And so she engages in a relationship with Octavia, which spans years. And it's all to use to her advantage to bring Caesar down. And it's just so the patience that shows of her just waiting to be able to use that relationship to find out some piece of information that'll help her. It's just so devious. And
there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
and eventually she doesn't get the information that she wants, but she does get a crucial piece, which we're not going to talk about yet.
Didn't know what she had when she got that information,
and that comes into play, and that's the piece of information that ultimately leads to being able to assassinate Caesar. And I guess that is a good opportunity to turn back to Lucius Vorenus. And when he and Pullo return to Rome, we are introduced to Vorenus's wife, Niobe.
Her other dysfunctional family.
Who is played by the absolutely enchanting Indira Varma.
Oh, she is so good in this. And
she's so different. I was so taken aback by how different her performance is in this versus her performance in Game of Thrones. Because she's a very loving person who's made some errors.
Understandable errors.
Very understandable. And you could even say, I mean, I from the perspective of thinking her husband was dead, that's not really a mistake that she should be punished for. However, I guess you can say whether making that mistake with her sister's husband was probably an error.
I feel though that the person, her sister's husband, she's a widow. She feels at this point that she's a widow. The pay that she was receiving from her husband's military service has stopped with no excuse other than, well, he must be dead, and the army doesn't make mistakes. Who does she have to turn to? She only has family, and the only male family member whom a woman can turn to for help was her brother-in-law. And I feel like he used his position, he had authority and power over her. So who's to say whether he didn't manipulate that to, getting something that he wanted. His wife wasn't able to give him a child. So,
yeah.
So he got a child with his sister-in-law.
Yeah. And so this is a situation that Vorenus walks into as he comes home with seeing his wife, who at first he's happy to see, but then there's a child in her arms, and he
just turns around and she's holding that child,
and he jumps to the correct conclusion, but she covers it up by saying that it's actually his grandson and that it's their daughter's child. And
which I think was kind of, it's not like they live in a house by themselves. They live in an apartment complex, basically, where everybody knows what's going on in every other house. The walls are thin. They know there are very few secrets in this type of a complex. So for her to, perpetrate, she would have had, she was pregnant. Everybody knows she was pregnant. Everybody knows she gave birth. Everybody knows that child is hers because she's been breastfeeding it for the last several months. So this is quite a secret that she is trying to perpetrate when her husband comes home. So, there was quick thinking on her part to say that it was her daughter, but how was she thinking she would ever be able to keep that secret for any length of time? It's like a death sentence over her head every day, just waiting. Was one of the neighbors going to get mad at me and just, slip up? Or, obviously her sister had quite a big problem with it. She almost dropped the dime on her several times, whether, willingly or unwillingly. So that's a big secret. It's, yeah.
But so this hangs over her head for a number of years, and she's begging the gods for to protect her child, and it's just, but miraculously over the course of time, she and Vorenus grow close, and they actually have quite a wonderful marriage, albeit with this one huge secret.
Thanks to Titus Pullo. Let's just say that this big lug. If Titus Pullo hadn't kind of intervened in that situation and done a few things get to when we get to Titus, but he's kind of a facilitator, a bridge maybe between the two, because Titus Pullo's, according to him, he's great with women. Women love him, so he's giving marriage and relationship advice to Vorenus, which kind of works, kind of greases the wheels a little bit. So, they they have to learn how to be with one another again. 8 years is a long time to be separated and just step back into a marital relationship that, marriages on the best of days need daily upkeep. So,
Yeah, Leaf, we're just gonna chalk that up to dramatic license and not really question that. I don't know. I certainly would not be the the expert on that. So
I'm just going to say, Vorenus really didn't know a lot about women and women's bodies and how things, you know, he didn't get a good sex education class, is all I'm going to say.
it's kind of hilarious how little he knows about women in general and how to relate to them. And
Yeah.
the fact that he asks Pullo for advice.
Right? This guy, that guy.
Which let's go back a little bit because we've talked about Vorenus and Pullo, but I really want to talk about their relationship because they start off so antagonistic.
It's the best. Their relationship is the absolute best. I love these two. This odd couple of the Roman legion. I love them. Like you say, John, there couldn't be two more different characters in the series that just find one another and they're thrown together. And
the show starts off where they're in the middle of battle and Pullo just charges forward. He doesn't keep formation, which is very important in the Roman army. And when he's reprimanded and he strikes his superior officer, who is Vorenus, that lands him in a jail cell. And
after he'd been whipped.
Yeah. And then I just love his reaction to that, where he just sort of brushes it off. He's like, "Is that it? And I was just beginning to enjoy myself."
Right. And that's just Pullo to a T. He just has this attitude like, whatever.
And I do want to mention this. There's a scene where he's praying to get out of this situation, to be freed from the jail cell. And I have to say that there's a beautiful mirror scene towards the end of the season when we'll get into the details of it later, but when he's about to be sent into the arena to fight to the death, and he's also saying a prayer, but this time it's for all the people he cares about. And so you see that character arc. It's so beautiful to the point where, I mean, not that he's a completely unselfish person by that point, because that's just he cares about himself. That's kind of a big part of his character, but it does show his enormous growth.
Yeah, other people have entered into his circle now that he cares about, which is before he was all alone. He had no one but himself when we first meet him. He comes from the lowest classes of, his mother was a slave. He has no idea who his father was. He was a pretty big guy, because Pullo is very, very large. He's very physical. And he joins the army, and it's either that or, eating rats off the street, I guess. So, but he has no one but himself to worry about, to take care of. So he's always had to take care of himself because, look out for number one, so to speak. And that's where his arc starts. He's just looking out for number one.
So the situation that brings them together in the initial episode is that there's maneuvering going around politically between Caesar and Pompey in the first episode, and part of this is that Pompey arranges to have Caesar's standard stolen, which is an eagle. A big gold eagle, and of course,
I'm wearing my eagle today. Just throw it out there.
I'm wearing my Roman red. But and Caesar makes a show of this being a bigger deal than it actually is, to kind of to make Pompey think that he's weaker than he actually is.
Right. But in the eyes of his men, it is a big deal.
It is important. I just don't think that it's necessarily as important as he makes it out to be. But that said, it is still a major thing. And so he has he delegates to Mark Antony to have someone find in the eagle. And so he, which is again showing the hilarity and viciousness of Mark Antony in one scene where he brings Vorenus in and tells him, he asks him, how would you go about finding Caesar's eagle? And Vorenus just kind of offhandedly says he'd, torture a couple of people who were on guard and until somebody talks, and he's like, we are of one mind. Do it. And Vorenus is like, do it, sir.
Do it. What? Me?
So he finds a sort of a lead on the eagle, and he enlists Pullo because he thinks that it's a fool's errand. They're never going to find it. And
if they don't find it, it's just as bad as having stolen it themselves to have to admit failure in this. There's like no winning in this situation unless they find that eagle, which is nearly impossible, So yeah. So
he says, Pullo, in essence, you're dead already. So, which is why he's chosen. And of course, eventually they're led to, they discover a captive Octavian who's been sent to Gaul to carry a gift to his uncle. And so they end up rescuing him, and the same people who took Octavian, hostage were the same ones who stole the eagle. So they miraculously find it. And this is sort of the beginning of
two birds with one stone.
Yeah. This is the beginning of the two of them sort of developing a reputation for pulling off the impossible and being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And so this develops over the course of many, many years where they're together and they get into all these situations. And there's another hilarious situation with Pullo in the next episode, which has my favorite title of any episode, which is how Titus Pullo brought down the Republic.
And it's just a trip. These two.
Where Pullo gets into a bar brawl and makes some enemies who are loyal to Pompey. And as
he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, let's just say. He wanders into a bar.
There's an important vote going on which determines if Caesar is going to be proclaimed, an enemy of the state, basically. And so Mark Antony has to be let into the Senate chambers to veto this motion because he's actually been made the people's tribune.
Yeah.
And so they have to walk towards the Senate chambers, but one of the people who Pullo gets into a brawl with sees him and attacks Pullo. And so it's seen as an attack on Antony, and it launches the whole thing and it's an even bigger conflict. And
nobody wanted this to happen.
Exactly.
All the sides are like, oh crap, how do we stop this? Because it was all supposed to be like for proxy and just positioning and jockeying, but nobody wanted to come to war. Nobody wanted that. And, both sides, Caesar and Pompey and everybody, Cicero, Cassius, they all just want, okay, how do we get out of this? So they're talking to this senile old senator who's like the mouth of the Senate. He's got a head wound, and they're like, so we never let the session out. And so when we come back tomorrow, it's the same session, right? right? And he's like, yeah, I think so. So they're trying to get the,
Pompey is like, senile old fool. Why didn't you just say so at the start?
So I mean, it's all about politics, but it was not. It was all supposed to be for show. None of this was ever supposed to have gone forward. And then our buddy,
Wait, I just want to comment on this. Leaf, yes, we'll be doing a stream on the second season the week after next. Next week, I'll be talking about Pride and Prejudice with another guest, and then we will return for the second season of Rome after that. So you guys do have time to catch up. And yes, Bernie, we did. You're late.
Yes, we did. You missed it. It was glorious.
Bernie, I'll get with you afterwards, and I'll let you know. I have to look to see which one I got. But yeah, so just a quick word also about the Senate. There's some great cast members who I just want to mention briefly. David Bamber is actually Cicero, and he's just brilliant because he's, I mean, credit where credit's due. He goes with Pompey and decides to fight, for the Republic, but he's also such a sniveling, weasel at the same time, who will do what he has to do to protect himself. And, it's a great performance. It's just, I don't know how true to life it is, because I think there's been some objection that he was perhaps not quite as sniveling in real life and was quite a patriot. But for the sake of the show, it's a great character.
Yeah.
And then you also have Cato.
Oh, Cato's the man.
Just that man, the way he just enunciates.
He is as scandalous as it gets. Okay. Yeah. The law is the law. The law is not pudding. So, and he goes out like a boss. Hi there. Yeah. He goes out like a boss. He's hounded, and the army's defeated, and they've been pushed from Greece to Egypt and all the way to the ends of the earth.
Rather than capitulate, he stabs himself. He falls on his sword, literally. Falls on
his sword. Yes. He goes out like a boss, and he's like, nope, I'm making I may not be able to win. The other guy, he was with him. It's like, we're alive. There's hope. We can still raise an army, this, that, and the other. And Cato sees the writing on the wall. One, he's tired. He's really tired.
I think Sissy got out.
Okay. And, he's, even with his final act, he is going to defy Caesar. She's going to defy a tyrant. And it's like, he's not going to give anybody the satisfaction of, like, either he'll crawl back and kiss Caesar's feet. He's not going to do it. He's like, no, I'll just kill myself out here on the end of the earth, and they'll hear about it in Rome. And they did.
Yeah, and he actually implores his cohort Scipio to go back and ask Caesar's forgiveness, but even Scipio goes with his friend and orders his soldier to decapitate him. So, and there's a comment, and actually, Bernie, we have talked about Tobias, but I'm going to mention him again. There's a comment that Brutus makes to Cicero, something to the effect of, we are cowards. We aren't brave. If we were, we'd be with Cato and Scipio in the afterlife.
In the afterlife, yeah.
Um, so, and as long as we're talking about the Senate, let's give a shout out to the performance of Kenneth Cranham as Pompey,
Oh
who,
yeah.
you know, this is another, I keep saying it's a brilliant performance, but this show is just filled with
Well,
such amazing actors and
and they've got really great characters to work with, you know. These characters are just come to life, but they've got such depth and meaning to everything that they do. You know, not only are they historical, but they've been portrayed by some of the greatest writers, you know, that the world has known. Shakespeare has written about this very thing. So these characters are with us. You know, they've been with us for a long time. So, you know, they've got a lot to work with.
time has actually gotten away from me, and I had not realized that we're a little over halfway through. But I do want to just take a moment to talk about a couple things before we continue. First of all, I want to again thank everybody for coming by. This is great. I hope you all are enjoying yourselves, even if you haven't seen the show. And hopefully, this will encourage you to watch it, because it's an absolutely phenomenal show. And next week, I'm going to be talking with my friend Jared Kozal about the 2005 Joe Wright film Pride and Prejudice, starring Keira Knightley.
Of course it is.
Which, no, Leaf, it is not the wrong version of Pride and Prejudice. It is totally the right version. So, you know... So, you know, I love and respect all you guys, but yep, get over that one. But no, it's great. Jared is as much of a Keira Knightley and Pride and Prejudice nut as I am. So he's oh wait, now are you impersonating me, Nessie?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to start spamming here. Who's Keira Knightley?
Oh God,
I'm OJ. There is no John.
That's a private chat joke. Nobody else is gonna get that.
Okay. We did.
But yeah, so that'll be a lot of fun. And you know, I thought that was really interesting to have Jared do that with me next week, because aside from the fact that he loves the movie as much as I do, it's, you know, I don't think it's that common a thing to, you know, see two guys on a stream talking about how much they love Pride and Prejudice. So hopefully that'll provide something different. And if it goes well, I know he and I have talked about doing some of the other films in the Joe Wright, Keira Knightley trilogy. so we'll see where that goes. And then after that, Nessie and I'll be back talking the next week about Rome season 2, which will be great. And because even though I think it's not as refined as season 1, because they had to rush through some things, it's still a great season, and we're gonna have a blast talking about it. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump back in. We were talking about Pompey, and Pompey is interesting because I feel like at times he thinks he's more crafty than he actually is.
Well, he suffers from never thinking that he even has the possibility to be defeated.
Yeah.
You know, on paper, everything looks perfect. Everything looks textbook great. He's got more men. He's got the Senate behind him. He's had the popular will of the people behind him. And he goes through defeat after defeat, and he doesn't know how it is. He cannot understand how it is that he is losing, you know, when he has every advantage on his side. So it's really very sad. to see this guy devolve, from the most powerful man in Rome to this sad, sad man, that we see begging for the lives of his family.
Yeah. And it's really haunting that when he actually finally meets his end, we don't see what becomes of his family. And,
No.
and that really stuck out to me. And because of course he arrives in Egypt thinking that he is going to find safe harbor.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, because they're going to offer him up as a gift to Caesar, which backfires on them because Caesar is outraged by the lack of respect shown to a consul of Rome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's great. That's a wonderful performance in that moment by Kieran Hines, just to see his outrage.
Absolutely, because Pompey was his friend, just like Brutus was his friend. Pompey was his friend. They worked together many, many years, and politics got in between the friendship. But he did not stop caring for him, even as he berated Pullo and Vorenus for letting him go, for showing him mercy. He explained in that moment that mercy was his to give. It wasn't for Vorenus and Pullo to give, and it certainly wasn't for Ptolemy to take. It was his.
Yeah, that and the episode that transpires beforehand, where we actually see Pullo and Vorenus meet him. That's just a great scenario. You can see the respect that Vorenus has for Pompey, because I think this is a man that he does greatly respect, because Vorenus is all about the Republic, and he's eventually swayed to support Caesar as the show carries on. But Vorenus is a guy who, if he had his way, the Republic would stand as it was in the days of old.
Right.
And so it's just such a beautiful moment when they're packing up to leave and Pompey wakes up and Vorenus says, "Go back to sleep." It's just, we're going to take off. But it also shows Vorenus's character, that he admits what he's done to Caesar, because they could have very easily just kept quiet about it.
Didn't have to say a thing.
Yeah, but it's his code of honor that he has to, to tell Caesar what he's done. Yeah, and again, it comes down to Caesar, saying, any other man I would punish, but those two have powerful forces on their side, and so he spares both of them.
Yeah, can we talk about how they actually get to that point where they meet Pompey? This was I think it was one of the best episodes of the season. Mark Antony had been left in Rome to hold the city for Caesar while he's off making war with Pompey, and he had the 13th with him, which is Caesar's most loyal legion. They'd been with him through all of his wars in Gaul and what have you. So, and this is the one that Vorenus and Pompey and Pullo are a part of. So finally, Caesar calls him and says, "Hey, old friend, I need you." So they take ship, and in a terrible storm, it wipes out most of the legion. I think Antony survives, a few others. What was it, 44 I think out of the entire legion survive. It's a pitiful number. And this horrible storm, Pullo and Vorenus just wash up on this little strip of land. It's not even, I wouldn't even call it an island. It's like a sandbar in the middle of the Mediterranean. You mean nothing, no trees, no shelter, no water, nothing. It's just, they are excuse me, they're alive and they have some pieces of the shipwreck, one another, and some dead bodies. And they're like, Vorenus is like,
this is where we die.
This is where we die. And Pullo, he's just going around picking up scrap. He's like, oh, this is a nice sword. Let me put this on,
And he's trying to fish. And Vorenus says, we're going to die of thirst way before we die of hunger.
And Pullo was just like, he's not giving up, and then so they notice that the corpses around them are floating in the water where they've been dead for, days and days, and the gases have started, how bodies do. Or maybe you don't, but I'm not going to go into it. But they're floating. And they put this raft together by lashing the corpses and some stray pieces of the shipwreck, and they're just like, whatever, this is better than just sitting here and dying of starvation and thirst. So they just lash this thing together and push back out into the sea. And son of a bitch, if they don't A, make it to shore, but B, they're found by Pompey and his family as they're traveling, on their getaway march. It's like they can't fail. Even when they're not even trying.
It's like, let's just talk about what a desperate maneuver that is in the first place, because it's just as likely that they're just going to die out at sea.
They're floating on shark bait.
Yeah.
They're floating on shark bait.
And the fact that they wash up on shore, any shore. And that of all, it just adds to, once again, Caesar says, first they find my stolen standard. Then they, among a handful of people, survive, in the voyage across the sea. And they wash up on shore and find Pompey Magnus. It's just like...
what are the odds? Yeah. Literally, what are the odds of this happening? But it's, I think it's, Pullo is continually praying to Fortuna throughout the entire series. That's kind of like his patron god is Fortuna, which is good fortune, obviously good luck. He's continually having conversations with them. So fortune is on their side. Apparently they got a soft spot for these two, and they really do have gods on their side. Yeah. So, Caesar's got to keep them around. They're like his good luck stones, Yeah,
I do want to rewind a little bit and talk about the circumstances leading up to the sea voyage with Mark Antony in Rome. Because this episode was such a great showcase for James Purefoy, because he gets to play Mark Antony as kind of holding court in Rome. And he's tempted to even betray Caesar. Oh, oops. I lost Nessie for a second. Hopefully she'll come back. But as I was saying, this is a great episode for Antony because Caesar is surrounded. This is a time when there's a reversal of fortune for Caesar. And so Pompey actually sends word to Antony for a truce between them, and for them to actually work together to bring down Caesar. And Antony actually... Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I just had to step away from the camera for a second. Sorry.
So Antony is tempted to actually accept the offer, and he sort of delays in his reaction to, about whether he's going to go help Caesar or align himself with Pompey. And so that whole episode is kind of, the tug of war with himself, and just the look that Vorenus gives him when when it becomes apparent that he's actually considering betraying Caesar, it's like this look of, I don't necessarily agree with Caesar, but have you no honor at all?
Yeah.
And then it's so great that what ultimately convinces him is that Atia actually tries to get him to betray Caesar so that they can wed and she can, rise in power. And he's so repulsed by this that it launches him into action, and he goes to aid Caesar, his friend. It's sort of like he's seen how despicable a move that would actually be. And
yeah, Atia really just held a mirror up to him so that he could just by seeing and her reaction and how, power hungry, vicious, whatever you want to say, how she's like willing to just like, okay, Caesar, he's old news. He's going to be defeated. I got to take care of myself. And, just having that reflected back to him, he just was disgusted, by that. And that's, and he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it.
And then he made sure to, he punches Pompey's emissary on his way out. To make it clear what he's
doing. By the way, to make this perfectly clear, no. The answer is no. So, and he knows when he goes off that, the odds of Caesar winning at this point are not good. He is outnumbered. His men are sick. They're starving. They're pushed, almost to the brink. And, Pompey's sitting in luxury and, has the numbers advantage. And
Nessie is frozen up. Let's see if that changes. Yeah, hopefully we'll let's see if we get her back in a second. So yeah, so I guess we'll talk about what happens next. Caesar actually is in a holding pattern with as far as the battle with Pompey, and he's trying to force Pompey into battle. And so we have this situation where Pompey is just sort of waiting him out, which is the right decision. But he's urged by his followers to actually meet Caesar in battle because the people require a decisive victory. And this is the absolute wrong thing to do. Pompey should have actually listened to himself in this circumstance, and because he doesn't, he ends up losing the battle, even though they had the numbers. But as Caesar rightly says, I think we might be getting Nessie back. Let's see.
Yeah, sorry.
There we go.
My internet's being a little fickle today. It must be the millions of people that are sucking up all the bandwidth or something.
Yeah, that's fine. So I was talking about the battle that comes between Pompey and Caesar. And this is actually a moment where Pompey should have listened to his instincts instead of giving in to pressure. Because he would have won. Because all he had to do was wait Caesar out, because, the army would dissipate because they were essentially in a holding pattern. But unfortunately, he's told by his comrades that the people of Rome will require a decisive victory. And so he's pressured to meet him in battle. And even though they have the numbers, he loses. Because Caesar even says that his men have no choice but victory, whereas
Right.
Pompey's men can run. They have options.
Right.
So
They could have, like you said, they could have just waited him out and let disease, starvation, desertion take its toll, and it wouldn't have been a, shall we say, they kept pushing it as an honorable victory. It's like, well, it would still have been a victory, and the outcome was assured by just taking the chance of meeting him on the field. Anything can happen. Anything can happen, and it did.
yeah, and it's just one of those things. It's like Pompey is the type where he's always thinking. He's thinking militarily and tactically, and not necessarily always politically. And he's not always he's not thinking on that layer of like being. Caesar is always kind of a step ahead of him in terms of the politics and
Two steps.
And making things appear differently than they are. But this is one case where Pompey should have trusted his tactical instincts, and if he had, things would have turned out differently.
Yeah.
But no, Beth
listened to the politicians at that point. That's what he gets for listening to the politicians.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and shift back over to Vorenus and his family, because I want to get us leading up to what plays into Caesar's assassination, and this is a big part of that. While Niobe is keeping the secret for all these years, Vorenus at first has a very standoffish relationship, not just with Niobe, but also with his children, who are kind of afraid of him.
Rightly so.
Yeah, because he's a fierce guy. He doesn't know how to relate to family, and especially to women. And so that goes for his daughters. And it's not just Niobe that's keeping the secret. Obviously, his daughter has to pretend that she has a child that is not her own. And so that's a very tense relationship as well. But ultimately, they do form family bonds. And it's nice to see, because even though, part of you knows that it's, there's this doom hanging over the whole thing, it's extremely heartwarming to see them all come together over time as a family. And you see that love develop. And the last episode is so heartbreaking because everybody's so happy when the episode starts off.
Yeah.
They're taking a look at, their land that they've been granted, because by this point, Vorenus has risen high, because as he rises high, Pullo kind of descends, and Pullo eventually finds himself in the underworld. And
yeah, he's in a pretty bad place.
Yeah, and he's turned assassin, and he's actually caught, and I don't think he particularly cares by that point, because he's haunted by what he's done. And he feels great guilt. And there's that great scene where, the old woman actually sees the murder that he commits, and he just crouches down on the street, and he's imagining, all these multiple versions of the same old woman accusing him. And the next thing we see, he's in prison and he's found guilty, and he winds up in the arena. Vorenus goes to just watch, and it's a beautiful last stand.
I cried. It was so good.
Yeah, because at first Pullo doesn't want to fight at all, but then the other gladiators insult the 13th, And
Yeah.
Pullo won't have that. He's going to
No.
defend the name of his brothers in arms. And so he starts fighting, and, and it's this whole big, wonderful fight scene. And he cries out 13, and it urges Vorenus to, when Pullo has lost all his energy and he's about to die, Vorenus charges in and defends him.
Yeah.
And it's just such this heartwarming, beautiful scene. And they're made famous by this. It becomes celebrities, essentially.
The people love it. They see it as a story of redemption and brotherhood, and they just flock to this, and it's like you said, they become like superstars. They've got graffiti on the wall. Graffiti is a big deal in Rome. It's how the plebs showed their support or disapproval of anything that's going on, because they can't write, but they can show things in picture, and everybody understands it. Yeah, I'm a Pullo fan too.
And so where we are as the final episode approaches, because Caesar can't really punish Vorenus for what he did, even though Vorenus wasn't supposed to intervene. But because now he's held as a hero, Caesar says if he can't punish him, he has to reward him. So he makes him a senator, which of course the other members of the Senate are not happy about, because Vorenus is a pleb, which is a commoner. But it works out great for Vorenus and his family, because they rise. I mean, not eventually, but for the time being, it's good news, because he rises high, and so everything's great with the family, and he has the love of his wife, his children, and everything seems really good. But then, of course, we come back to the fact that by this point, Brutus has turned, because he's felt betrayed by Caesar, who doesn't. I think Caesar kind of wants to trust Brutus, but he has enough suspicions that he plans to send Brutus away. And this to Brutus is a betrayal. It's a lack of trust. So eventually he goes to his mother and agrees to take part in the plot against Caesar. And the name of Lucius Vorenus comes up, because Caesar is keeping him by his side as protection. And of course, Servilia knows the name, because she learned it from Octavia, who had that little piece of information that she got from her brother, which we didn't even talk about that, but we'll see what we have time for. But so Servilia has this information that she actually knows about Niobe's infidelity, and the fact that that the child is hers. And so they strategically use this information to draw Vorenus away. And
at the crucial moment.
At the crucial moment, just as they're about to go into the Senate chambers. And so then I don't want to, let me save the intricacy of the assassination scene, because I want to talk first, because I know Beth is, mentioning this about talking about the finale with the kids and everything. It's just heartbreaking when Vorenus returns home, and Niobe doesn't really know why he's so upset. He's throwing things all over the place, and he says, "Where is he?" And she's like, "Who?" And he says, "Your son."
Your son.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. It's disappointing to see Vorenus picks up a knife in that moment, because it's such a regression. It's like, this is the sort of his brute nature of, I've been dishonored, and so I have no choice but to perhaps commit this act of violence for my own honor. And we don't know if he'd actually have done it or not. I'd like to think that he wouldn't have, but we honestly don't know. and she doesn't either. So, and she's not going to have him, live with having killed her. And also she's thinking of the child. So she's hoping that by sacrificing herself and actually doing the deed herself, that it'll earn some mercy for her son. And again, it's an act of love for Vorenus, because I don't think she wants him to live with her murder. So she actually, sits herself up on the ledge and just lets herself fall. And just that look of disbelief and heartbreak on Vorenus's face. And then we later cut back and he's just cradling her in his arms. And it's at that moment that her son steps forward. And it's just this look of grief and sadness and despair on Vorenus's face as he looks at the child. It's just so harrowing and so heartbreaking. I don't know, what did you think about it, Nessie? I want to hear your thoughts.
Gosh, it just broke my heart, because this man, Vorenus, as flawed as he is in relationships, truly, deeply, completely loved his wife, loved his family, and just to be because the other thing that he loves as much is his honor, and that's been apparent through the entire series. Even the things that he does that he gets in trouble for are always over his honor. And for those two to finally come into, against each other, his wife, whom he loves, his family that he's so deeply vested in, and his honor, just to come into that crosshairs, is tearing him apart. It really destroys him in that moment. Yeah. And the whole thing about, the father having dominion over, it's not just that they make all the decisions in the family, in this society, the paterfamilia. He has the power of life and death over his family. It just tore me up right then. Just tore me up. So, yeah.
Yeah. So Vorenus is, understandably distracted when he hears this revelation. And so he, having run straight home, Caesar wonders, and he just sort of, offhandedly says, "Where's Vorenus?" And his slave Pasca, who we haven't even talked about, that's a great character too. But if we have time, we'll touch on him. But he says he was right behind us.
Yeah, he was right here.
Yeah, and through cunning calculation, Antony is being distracted outside the Senate.
Yes. They also get Antony out of the way.
Yeah.
Very smoothly.
And so Caesar enters a very crowded Senate chamber, and one of the plotters comes up to him and just sort of innocently is asking him about, you were going to arrange this for my brother or whatnot, and then in the next moment he grabs hold of him, and Caesar is just like, "Do not touch me," and then everybody starts clawing at him, and the knives come out.
Oh, the knives come out.
And it's just, and one can't help but obviously, think about, obviously, this came first by a long measure, but one can't help but think of Jon Snow at the end of A Dance with Dragons.
Yeah. And he never felt the fourth knife.
Yeah.
Or
And
the 40th in this case.
It's so horrific to see him so bloody and
still struggling, and with all of those wounds all over his body, and the blood, and just struggling. Oh, it's horrible.
And then just the way he's shaking on the floor. And Brutus, by this point, has dropped his own knife. He's in such horror at everything that's transpired, and he's so traumatized. But then, of course, he's handed the knife, and he is urged to strike the final blow. And, when we talked about this earlier, but just that moment where he kneels down next to Caesar, and just the sadness on both of their faces. And then he, stabs him, and it's just, it's so heartbreaking.
It is. You're not sure at this point if it's even like, even a mercy killing, at this point, because he's been so horribly wounded, and he's suffering, and he's suffered such agony and betrayal, and then just the final blow. It's the deepest cut of all, so to speak.
Yeah, and after that's done, I don't remember the character's name, but one of the co-conspirators, grabs his hand with the knife, puts it upward and says, "Thus ever for tyrants." Mm-hmm. And Brutus just shoves him aside, and he wants no congratulations. He's disgusted with himself. And then Antony walks in at that moment, and you just know that they've got some things coming. There's going to be a reckoning.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of the moments where, Antony is such a flamboyant character who makes such a show, and in that moment you just get his cold, dead stare. And that's more frightening than anything.
Yes, that's definitely most dangerous.
He backs away slowly and just walks out the Senate chambers into season 2. And that's interesting, Leaf. Yeah, this is one of those things where, for dramatic purposes, you have him die within moments on the show. But that is interesting to hear that he lay there dying for hours, which is just horrific.
Yeah.
And he tries to cover himself up as
with his
dying.
shawl. It's almost like he was pulling the death shroud over himself. That's how I looked. He was covering himself.
And while all this is going on, Servilia has invited Atia over for drinks, and
just a little cocktail.
Octavian goes with her, and these scenes bookend the assassination.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts off, they're all being very pleasant, and she says, "I brought you here so I may tell you what has happened." And then it cuts to the assassination. And then after Brutus's cry of anguish, we cut back into the scene, and we just see Atia's face, where, and it's probably not even, horror over what's happened to Caesar, but it's her own sense of,
oh shit.
What? She and her family are in danger now. And
they've made some very powerful enemies.
Yeah. Stephen. Yeah, sorry, Stephen. We're at
Spoiler.
we said there would be spoilers, so sorry.
Yeah, some spoilers.
I love
You had to go make a
Servilia's.
salad.
I love Servilia's line of "the tyrant is dead, the Republic is saved. Would you like some honey water?" You know, it's
but is it?
well, this is, you know, this is what they believe to have happened at the end of the season.
Right.
And
Long
honestly, if we didn't know history, we might actually think that this could be the case.
Yeah, because they killed the bad guy, right? Right?
But it's more complicated than that. So, but she tells Atia that she's not going to harm her yet. She wants her to run and hide. Now, the best part of the scene is the look on Octavian's face as he stares her down. And anybody who knows history knows, you know, who Octavian eventually becomes and where his character leads. And if Servilia knew what was in store,
had a clue
of what he was capable of, she would be terrified.
Oh yeah, because Octavian pinpointed Servilia early, much earlier, like when he comes back from school and realizes how much time she's been spending with his sister and some things that transpire. He's looking for reasons. You know, Octavian he's brilliant. He's very savvy politically, even at such a young age. He's a very A1 player of the game. So he knows what he wants to know, what makes people tick, what their motivations for doing things are. Nothing is as it seems on the surface. And he has Servilia's number like right away, you know. Yeah. So if she had any inkling what she was messing with, she probably wouldn't have invited him over for, you know, dinner and drinks. But she had to gloat. She had to gloat. She could not help it. She wanted them to know it was her.
God, it's such... I mean, this is one hell of a finale. When we talk about eventful finales, I don't think you can get more eventful. And there's stuff that we actually haven't even really touched on.
We never got to Egypt.
Oh my God, we didn't talk about it. Well, let's go back. If we go
a few minutes.
Yeah, if we go a few minutes over, let's do that. Apologies, guys, because, you know, here we've talked about the big climactic moments of the season, but we really do have to go back and talk about Egypt because there's hilarity. There is, you know, just...
my God.
There's stuff that happens, but honestly, it's the hilarity that sticks with me. Let's talk about Cleopatra.
Yes.
Because what's great is that, especially at the time, this was a somewhat different portrayal of Cleopatra, just in her appearance and just the fact that, you know, we first see her and she's, you know, she's basically
very young.
She's very young, and when we first meet her, she's also really high.
Very high. Like chained up and high in the desert. But I guess if you're going to be a royal captive, what do you do with a semi-divine royal captive? You know, her brother husband, Ptolemy, the whatever number he was, he could only have been 10, maybe.
He's
8?
such, like, you want this kid to have his ass handed to him, like, right off the bat.
You know, he's the boy kings, but what can you say? entitled Boy Kings.
And
Yeah,
so
and
there, and so there's
married
civil,
his sister.
yeah, so there's conflict between the two of them. There's civil war going on, and Caesar, after dealing with
Pompey.
being delivered Pompey's head, and actually taking revenge on the man who actually killed Pompey, which is a great scene in of itself, because the guy is sent to deliver the message that he's the one who killed Pompey.
Right.
And when
So kill the messenger. It's okay.
when Pasca reads the letter, he just kind of looks at him for a second first before handing the letter to Caesar. It's like,
sorry, dude. They got you.
And so after that's dealt with, Caesar turns his attention to dealing with the situation between Cleopatra and Ptolemy.
Yeah, because Egypt at this time, and in most of for the continuing history in Rome, was feeding Rome. They depended so heavily on their shipments of grain to feed the population that the grain must flow, or Caesar is going to know the reason why.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's vitally important to his, political maneuvering.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're getting to this leaf, which may be one of my favorite parts of the season.
We'll get there.
Caesar sends Pullo and Vorenus to rescue Cleopatra because she's being held captive by Ptolemy's men. And she's in fact about to be killed, just to get her out of the way. But of course, it's like, dudes, are you not thinking that they're lying in wait, waiting to follow you to find her? If they had just kept her in captivity, maybe, they never would have found her.
It would have been a lot harder to find.
Yeah. And so Pullo and Vorenus follow Ptolemy's men and find Cleopatra, and Pullo charges in and stabs one of the guys to death several times. And so at this point, she's been saved, but now she's calculating that she's going to work on seducing Caesar to make sure that she's in a position of power, but she wishes that Caesar was right there so that they could conceive a child, because she deems that the time is right.
Auspicious, yes.
Yeah. And so they plot to pull a one over on Caesar, and so she'll have someone else father the child. All she has to do is make sure that she sleeps with Caesar soon after so that they can pull this off. So at first she enlists Vorenus, who is quite taken off.
Yeah, she sends her attendant outside to look them over.
Yeah.
First. It's like, whatever. And so Vorenus was the first choice. I think he just seemed a little bit more civilized. I don't know.
And so he's taken quite aback by this. And the servant says, "You will make coitus with the queen." And he's like, "You have that wrong. Coitus means make babies." And he's like, "Yes, make babies."
Yes, make babies.
And at which point Cleopatra just opens her legs. It's like, come on, just do it.
Yeah, come on. He's like, you were in the presence of a living God. How can you deny her what she says?
And this is so hilarious because you can
the
tell
look on his face.
You can tell that Brutus really wants to do this.
Yeah.
But by this point, he has such loyalty to his wife, and he's not going to betray her. So he marches out of the tent, goes over to Pullo, and says, "Pullo, you will report to the queen. Do as she says."
Do as she says. He's like,
and he's like, "Why? What's going on?" He's like, "Just go.
Just do it."
And Pullo has a ball of a time.
The right man was sent for the job.
And everybody outside the tent is like, making all these noises and cheering them on. And then he marches back out with a smile on his face, goes back into, their tent and lies down next to Vorenus, and he can't wait to just talk about it. And Vorenus is like, keep your mouth shut. We'll not speak of this again.
If you know what's good for you, you will never speak of this again. And Pullo was just like, but dude, she did these things. You don't understand.
Yes, for the Empire.
For the 13th.
Oh my God. And then Caesar stays and ultimately Cleopatra does seduce Caesar, which is relatively easy. It's like Caesar's not going to turn her down.
You're going to say no.
Because and let's be honest, Cleopatra just exudes sexiness in this. She is. I don't think any man would be able to turn her down. So, and
she's quite the force of nature herself.
Yeah. And so a child is eventually born because Caesar is kept there because
he stays for about a year.
Yeah, because because Alexandria is under siege by Ptolemy's supporters.
Mm-hmm.
And this bears mentioning because we talked about the battle earlier between Pompey and Caesar. These battles are not really shown on screen. And you can kind of see why this happened in season 1 of Game of Thrones, because this was a thing that HBO had kind of become proficient in, where you show the beginning, the start of a battle and the end of a battle, and you kind of skip all the stuff in the middle because of budget. And at this point, Rome did not have nearly anywhere close to the budget that Game of Thrones ended up having. Mm-hmm. So, it was just the reality of the production, which is fine because Rome is very much a show about the drama. And I don't think it suffers from not having those battles.
No.
So,
they did get to spend some money on costuming, though.
Yeah.
The costuming is excellent.
Yeah, the production value on the show is great. It's just they didn't have the battles, which is fine, But anyway. We'll wait a second for Nessie to rejoin us. Hello, Violent Messiah. Nice to have you here. Yeah, we're running a little late because we still have, some stuff we want to talk about. We talked about the end of the show, but we're just spending a little extra time. So, yeah. So anyway, so there's this great moment where Caesar holds up the child and shows it to the legion, and it's hilarious because everybody's cheering, and you see Pullo cheering, and Vorenus just kind of stares at him.
Like, dude, do you not realize what's going on here? Pullo, still not the sharpest crayon in the box.
Oh God. But yeah, that's great.
But that's just seeds for season 2. Leave it at that.
Because, obviously this is not spoiling anything. I think everybody knows that Cleopatra comes back into play. So even though we only get her for 1 episode this season, she's great. The actress did a phenomenal job, and she's going to be, really good. That's interesting, Aaron. I didn't take a look at the figures, but that's interesting to note that the first season of Rome had a larger budget than the first season of Game of Thrones. I mean, they certainly spent the money very well, and I think it's for the best that they probably put that money into other areas rather than try to do some battles. there is actually, I don't think this is a spoiler. There is a battle in season 2, which they actually went through to the trouble to actually show. I don't remember how big it is. I'm sure it's nothing compared to the stuff they eventually did on Game of Thrones. But I think they probably did want to portray one on-screen battle before the show ended. But anyway, as far as this season goes, I mean, there's a bunch of characters that we didn't really take the time to address. I mean, was there anything specifically that you wanted to point out, Nessie?
Let's see. I think we got all the main players. You did want to speak about some of the servants, some of the slaves in high positions.
Yeah, Posca is Caesar's slave, but he's really like, a secretary.
Right. Yeah.
He's given much more leeway than a lot of his slaves are, and he's
very much an advisor too, in like some of the political things and handling like bribes and payments and things like that. And
he's not afraid to speak up to Caesar within reason. He treads carefully, but he feels free to disagree with some of Caesar's decisions. When Caesar decides to make Mark Antony the people's tribune, he objects to that. And I think probably rightly so, because Antony, I don't think Antony even knows what subtlety is.
No.
So
no, every problem is a nail, and he, treats it with a hammer.
Sometimes in a very literal sense, as we'll come to see in the next season.
Yeah. And Timon, he's another, minor player, but
Timon is a great character. He's basically does the dirty work for Atia. And of course, he's Jewish, and Atia, basically gets his support by sleeping with him.
Occasionally.
Occasionally. And this is actually the first scene in which we see Atia where she is using sex to get something she wants from Timon, where she wants him to, buy this horse as a gift for Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of sets the stage for Atia, because this is a woman who is willing to use her sexuality to advance her power.
Oh yeah. She'll use whatever to get what she wants. She's not above using her own body. I mean, let alone her daughter, Yeah. It's just sex.
Another line that I love is when Timon realizes that this whole thing has been about, he says, "Oh, I see. You want the horse."
Oh, you want the horse.
And she says, "I do. But, but don't be silly now. And this was not a hardship for me. I've always found something perversely erotic about goaty little men." And he goes in the course of that sentence from looking pleased to like, what?
I had to play that like 3 times so I could hear exactly what it was she was saying. And I'm like, oh my God. Adia, you're the worst. But yeah, I mean, she keeps him around to do all of her, dirty work, dirty bidding.
She has him, murder her daughter's husband because they keep seeing each other. Yeah. And of course, this is the root of, what leads to Octavia confiding in and then eventually developing a relationship with Servilia, because Servilia plays on, her suspicions and correct suspicions that Atia had her husband murdered.
Yeah, and all of her resentments, and develops that relationship with her that she wishes she had with her mother.
And Timon also takes part in the public humiliation of Servilia, which happens after Atia finds out what she's been up to with Octavia. And the fact that, and we didn't talk about the fact that Servilia encourages a sexual encounter between Octavia and Octavian so that she can try and get some morsel of information about Caesar from Octavian.
Which she never gets that piece of information.
She never gets it because Octavian guesses what it's all about. She doesn't even have to say much of anything before he's like, so here comes the prize. And he doesn't divulge anything. And she is just immediately disgusted with what she's done.
And mortified. When she realizes how she'd been used in that way. And I mean, it's not something that she would have ever thought to do on her own. She really didn't have those types of feelings for her brother or desire for her brother. It's all just a tool. It's like she realizes that she's just disgusted, with herself. And she goes away for a while, And
it shows, but also it's interesting to see that Octavian suspects that something is fishy about the whole thing, but he goes along with it and sleeps with his sister. And so this is kind of the first big hint that we get that his upbringing has really done some damage to him as far as how he relates to sex and and the things that he's willing to go along with and to do.
Yeah.
And we'll see more of that in season 2.
Yeah, but his relationships with women going forward are not good.
Yeah.
Not good at all.
But then we're talking about Octavian right now, and he is really sharp.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great characterization because I don't think in other versions of films and TV movies about Caesar, and I don't think I had seen Octavian played as young as he is in this.
Right.
And so it was really interesting to watch him. And again, Max Purkis delivers a phenomenal performance. And he's just so
see how big of an influence that Caesar had on Octavian. Yeah, his whole life, but really, those formative years where he's transitioning from the boy child to the man, in those years when Caesar was in his rise and his whole education, because from he starts to direct even Octavian's education when he sends him to the priesthood, I think the pontiffs, which are the people who serve Jupiter there in Rome. And he serves as a pontiff, and he's actually the one who, once Caesar is going for his triumph, when he's getting doing his victory lap, so to speak, he does the whole ritual of
makes him he makes himself appear as the god Jupiter, and he has his face covered in red blood, essentially, and Octavian is the one who actually puts that on him, which was interesting. So I hadn't gotten that far in the season yet when I made the title card for for the stream. And so I had no idea that in the image that I used that it's actually Octavian standing above him. So that was cool to see when when we got to that point, because I had completely forgotten that. But
yeah, it's like he's having him. It's literally at that point where you can see how he's having him follow in his footsteps.
Yes.
Because he has brought him into his confidence. He's the only one who knows about his seizures, that he has the affliction, which he keeps. I mean, he's proven at that point that he can keep a confidence. And he sort of starts asking him questions, like he asked him at the dinner party. Well, how would you go about setting Rome to rights? What would you do? And starts to feel him out and see how his mind works. And that's the point where he says, I think you need to go and do, join this priesthood and get this type of education. Yeah, I did at your age. So he can see how Caesar is seeing him, maybe following in his footsteps.
Yeah, I do want to say, Pedar, thank you for popping in. It's nice to see you. Yeah, we will be doing the season 2 stream 2 weeks from now. So if you have time, catch up on the whole show, and then you can join us for that discussion. That'd be great. Yeah, so let me look, because I have all the list of cast. I think we've covered pretty much the major ones.
And the honorable mention to the guy who at every episode says the news and the decrees.
Ian Neese. His name is. He plays the newsreader. And
I love his character. He's so dramatic.
And you can see at certain points where he just, he'll be proclaiming, and then he'll be like, I don't really care. And he'll just, he'll trail off at the end. Step down.
Yeah, I mean, he never really has a name. All he does is read the news. He has no interaction with anyone else. He's just like the voice of the chorus, in like the Greek tragedies. And sometimes the news that he puts out is political, and sometimes it's got just like some weird, random thing in it. But it all kind of plays in together with what's going on in the story.
Well, and and it's a way of almost having a narrator pop in at certain points and to catch up. If you're kind of missing what's going on, it'll let you know. And I love the fact that, because we actually do see the Senate vote when Caesar has taken control, where, and Cicero calls the whole thing he's saying this is a farce. And, he made some motion to make Caesar dictator for 10 years. And of course it sails through. And then in the next episode, we just hear the newsreader say, Caesar has been made dictator for life. Like it's nothing, that's how we find out about that. It's just so great to have that character used in that way to deliver this monumental big thing as if it's just
it's just the news.
Yeah.
Just a thing. Yeah, so that was really a cool narrative device that they use on this.
And interesting, I do believe that actor, when they shot the original pilot for Game of Thrones, I think he played, what's the character's name? Who is the one who harbors Daenerys and Viserys? Illyrio, that's right. I think he was actually the actor who originally played Illyrio in the pilot, in the original pilot for Game of Thrones, before all the reshoots. But so I think we've covered most of the important things in detail. And honestly, guys, just if you haven't watched the show, do watch it. It's great. It's the precursor to Game of Thrones in just so many great ways, from the backstabbing,
Political intrigue. Oh my
politics.
God. If they had dragons.
Yeah,
I guess it didn't have the budget.
because when Game of Thrones came out, I do remember feeling like, yes, it was an adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire, but so much of it had a Rome vibe to it. And
oh yeah, especially everything going on in King's Landing.
Yeah,
everything there. That whole political grounded vibe is backstabbing, backroom deals. Oh yeah, it's very much it had its groundwork in Rome.
Yeah, and I do want to mention HBO is well known for their opening credits, and they've got some really interesting ones for this show. The theme music becomes really memorable as it goes on. Maybe not as much of an earworm as Game of Thrones, but it is, excellent. It is. And it goes through Rome, and you have all the graffiti on the walls kind of coming to life.
Yeah, that graffiti on the walls it's very so much a part of the intro, and you're looking to see what's new this time. What are we going to see this time? I always see something different.
Yeah, and we should talk about just very briefly about the production design of the show, which is great because often when you see depictions of ancient Rome in other movies and stuff, everything's really white and bright and shiny because that's kind of how all the ruins look. And so, but that's not the way ancient Rome was. There was lots of color, and it was dirty and
muddy
and
crowded.
Yeah, and the creators of the show I know went through a lot to really get the city itself accurate. I mean, there's some liberties taken with the story, obviously, but I think they really wanted to be authentic to the time and the places. And so I just think visually the show is amazing.
Yeah.
And
I was something that would otherwise be, you would think, oh, it's just going to be like a documentary. It's just dry. It's going to be dry. It's history. And they take it and they just inject so much life into it. They make you care about these characters. They're not just names on a page anymore. They've got faces and they've got passions. They've got desires and they have meaning. And it just brings, even though it's not completely accurate, it makes you care about it enough so that you might want to go and read a little more into it and learn a little more about it.
One of the great things is you really get, and a lot of this has to do with, why Pullo and Vorenus are central characters, because you get a sense of the civilian life of the less fortunate in Rome, and we get to see the criminal underworld and all that stuff, like with the character of Erastes Fulman, and and we talk about another great scene where let's just say that Vorenus has several run-ins with Erastes, and he basically pisses him off, and I do love the moment where he basically issues him, a challenge to, he has to meet him in the square to pay proper respect, or he's going to come and kill him. And it just so happens that at that moment, while they're preparing for a fight, and Caesar comes in.
Who would have thought Caesar would just come knocking on his door at that particular, that's just that whole luck, good fortune thing that hangs over these two. I mean, see, getting a visit in your little apartment from Caesar to give you honors, like, dude, this never happened.
And you just all of a sudden hear, make way for, Consul Gaius Julius Caesar, and he just comes marching in. And then the guards are all lined up, and Erastes comes, and he's like,
boys come up.
He's like, oh crap, this guy's got higher friends than I thought.
Yeah, he might want. He's just like, okay, all right, we'll back off. But I mean, when he hears the guards, the feet coming up, to the door of Vorenus, he of course he thinks that it's going to be these guys that have come to, throw fists with him, throw down, and it's like, oh, it's you, Caesar. What? He's just totally floored. Caesar's in my house. So yeah.
But yeah, so this show has so many, it shows Roman society at so many different levels and so many fascinating characters. And so yeah, just recommend it all live long day. It's a phenomenal show, and hopefully, if you guys hadn't seen it before, maybe we perked your interest. We've also spoiled a lot of it.
Spoiled the crap out of you.
But hopefully that won't keep you from watching it.
But I mean, the show's, it's over a decade old, so you've had your chance. You've had your chance before now, so get out there and watch it. Enjoy it. It's phenomenal, and it holds water even against today's standards.
It absolutely does.
And
it's unfortunate because we did have to at the time there was a wait of 2 years between seasons, and when we get to season 2 next time, we'll kind of talk about the circumstances surrounding that season. Season 1 was financed by both the BBC and HBO, and then the BBC wanted to pull out after the first season, and so they
probably had to make a Pride and Prejudice production or something. They had to put the money somewhere else.
But yeah, so they had to make some tough decisions with continuing the show, and ultimately it was decided that season 2 would be the only other season, and it was only going to be 10 episodes. So a lot of plans that they had to get compressed. So when we discuss season 2, we'll talk about how it's basically the plans that they had for the next 4 or 5 seasons condensed into one season. And when you consider that, I think they did quite an admirable job with it.
Yeah, they had quite a story to cram into 10 episodes.
Yeah. But we will leave that for next time. Before we wrap up, do you guys in the chat have any questions or points you want to raise about the show? Because now would be the time. Let's see.
Lady Leaf.
Yeah, at that point in the story, she should have left, but she wanted to stand with her husband, which I think shows what great love they had developed between them. Beth, am I the only one who didn't think Caesar was a tyrant? Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the show. And what we were actually talking about early on was that the way that Caesar is played by Kieran Hines, he's kind of an enigma, where you see the side of him that you can say, yeah, he is being tyrannical, he's dangerous, and he certainly does do things that are underhanded. He has his political rivals, murdered. But you can also make the argument that he is trying to set the Republic to rights, even though he sees himself as, the supreme ruler, essentially.
Yeah.
But it's because he's also so charming, and he's willing to grant mercy to people, or at least create the impression that he's willing to grant mercy, that we want to believe in him. I think when he says to Vorenus that he's going to give up his, powers as a dictator once things are settled, and once things are put right, we want to believe him.
But how long is it going to take for things to get settled? To what end it would be settled to Caesar's satisfaction? I mean, he does some good things. He does use his power in some positive ways, especially when it comes to the common people, because he's what you would call a populist in political terms. He derives his power from the people, so therefore he wants to keep the people happy, and also the army, because they're backing him with their swords. So he's elevating these people, giving them land, giving them jobs, because there's a tremendous amount of unemployment in Rome for freemen and plebs, because there's a glut of free labor from the slave trade. So having so much of percentage of, say, public works has to be done and employ citizens of the empire. That just speaks to Caesar wanting to better things for the people that he's ruling. If maybe they will not have to depend as much on slave labor if he legislates it, that they by law have to have a certain number of freemen on the job sites, or these people who haven't got land, the veterans from the military who fought and bled and served, but they don't own land. They have nothing after they retire from the military, and he wants to give them something that will be theirs to hold on to and for their kids. So, I mean, he is trying to do good things for the people, not of the nobility.
Yeah. I just want to chime in real quick. Anna, we haven't discussed that because that's season 2. So we're holding off on that until the next stream, because a couple of people went ahead and watched season 1 for this stream, and I don't want to spoil anything for them. So we'll hold off on that. Leaf brings up a good point, and actually dictator was not quite the same thing back then as we think of it today, because when you say dictator today, you automatically think of someone has just seized control unlawfully and is a tyrant, and is someone to be feared. But actually in ancient Rome, the dictatorship was actually something that the Senate would grant certain people from time to time if there was a specific circumstance that needed to be resolved, that required somebody with greater powers.
Yeah, it's like an expanded version of the electoral powers, like war powers or what have you, the ability to make changes without having as much red tape to deal with.
Yeah.
Which can be, to use a Star Wars, example,
it's essentially what happens with Chancellor Palpatine, where the whole thing where he's taking emergency powers, but he's supposed to relinquish those powers when the situation is over. And so they did have limits on the dictatorship. You would be compelled to relinquish that once the situation had been handled, or once a period of certain time had passed. So,
but that is with the Senate being like a co-equal branch of government, and he then Caesar then packs the Senate with more senators that are his supporters. So he kind of hedges his bets there. Not only does he have the expanded powers of the dictator, but the check on his power is undermined by being, packed with more of his supporters. So it's, it's kind of like for show that, he would lay these powers down, but the Senate's like, no, 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 keep the power, keep the power. And it's his supporters that are saying that. So,
which is why it's a big enough deal when, when Cicero has to go ahead and bring forward the motion for Caesar to be dictator for a period of 10 years. But that's why that's done, because it is actually, it's being presented as a lawful exercise.
Yeah, with a term limit.
Yeah, dictator did not just mean someone who just seized power. It was to be officially sanctioned by the Senate. And so that's why the illusion is given that this is being voted on by the Senate. And the fact that it's so absentmindedly referred to in the show that he's made dictator for life is, both hilarious and horrific, because that is not a thing that was supposed to even remotely happen. And that's where we get the sort of modern day conception of what a dictator is. But it's
like being elected president for life in some of these countries. It's just a sham of we had an election, yay, we're gonna have this guy in power for the term of his natural existence, which hopefully will be short. So
which shows why there was such a need to, among the resistance to kill him. And that needed to be done in their minds. And so I think, aside from that stain of personal betrayal that Brutus feels, I think by that point he is compelled that something needs to be done. And it needs...
Dictator for life, I think, was the actual straw that broke the camel's back there, because it showed then that even though he told them that, yes, I'll take the power, now, but I will put it aside. And then, oh, no, I'm not. That is the point that he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that, this guy's gone over the edge.
And it's interesting to watch Vorenus's character arc over the season, because he makes a lot of morals sort of, he sacrifices
a little at a time.
It's because, and he's eventually swayed by Caesar, but I mean, clearly he has to hear the news that Caesar's been proclaimed dictator for life, and underneath he's got to be feeling that. But at that point, I think he's swept along.
Well, that's Senator Vorenus.
Yeah.
Senator Vorenus. And by the fact that he was made a senator by this man, he has loyalty to him. But two, these are the type of changes that are, he's seeing that even though he has a good name, it's a common name. It's not he's not part of the nobility. He's not even completely, Roman. They bring that up, that he does have like Gallic ancestry. So, he is truly an outsider that is being raised to the heights of Roman power. And then if he can do it, then other people in the empire can do it as well. And he sees that maybe he does see that as a positive thing. He says that he believes in the Republic, and if he is as strong a believer in the Republic, and he's made a senator, then he feels maybe that he is part of bringing the Republic back, or what the Republic always stood for.
I think there is also an element of he's also doing what he thinks is best for his family as well.
Also, very much so.
Yeah.
Those two, his rise and is very much tied into what's best for his family. That's that little thing that allows him to put his moral question aside, because it's good for the family. It's good for Rome. What's good for Rome is good for the family. Those two are tied together so completely in his mind. Family and his family, his duty to Rome, and his honor as a soldier and a citizen of Rome. It's all tied together for him.
Yeah, Padar, that name doesn't ring a bell, so I'm gonna say no.
No, I don't think he may have been one of the stage names of those mummers that were doing the performance.
Mm-hmm.
One of them had something that was very Maximus. It was very naughty as well. So that could have been his stage name. It's Padar's fault. I blame him.
Yeah, you really have to see that to believe it. There's just a scene where Atia offers a gift to Servilia.
Oh, girl.
And we'll just leave it at that.
Leave it at that.
Because there's really no way to describe it. We'll just say that that for those of you who had complaints that Game of Thrones leaned on the side of female nudity, you're not going to have any objections about this show. Because there's
a lot of full frontal on display. Yeah. And I think the gift was like, she said it was a turtle, right? It was a turtle, wasn't it?
Okay, he's being cheeky.
Of course he is. Padar.
I thought so. I looked at that name. I'm like, are we sure that's a real name? So.
Oh, while we got this opportunity, Padar, get on Twitter. We want to follow you, dude. We want to get in contact with you. We love having you in the chat. Who knows? We might need to draft you for something. But yeah, please get on Twitter. Contact us on social media. You'll have all the links in the description, dude. You're missing out. You're really missing out.
And also, I want to say Beth popped up on Twitter. I think it looks like she already had an account, but she sort of popped up and added me as a friend, and I was delighted to see that, or followed me rather. Sorry, getting my social media mixed up. I just want to say, please take part more often and engage with us on Twitter, Beth. We'd love to have you there and all the discussions we have. That'd be great.
And that's where all of us do we get our ideas for our content. We've got Stephen right now from the Here Be Dragons has got a Twitter poll going on about some of our upcoming content there. Just take part in the discussion, our decision-making process. It helps make things easier for us. So yeah, get in contact with us. We'd love to hear your ideas and your opinions and everything.
Yeah. And Leaf, you may perhaps be right, but it does make for an absolutely hilarious scene nonetheless.
I had to, John. I had to put that up.
Oh, did you? I think you and I clicked on it at the same time. Yeah, Beth, you don't have to do too much. Just you can follow a couple of us and just chime in on some conversations we have. You'll find your way. I was very shy on Twitter initially as well. But you'll find it remarkable how quickly and how warmly you're received by the people on there. We have a great community on there, and I think you'll have a fun time. So I think we've covered the show in great detail, and I think we can leave it there. Nessie, why don't you just let the people know where they can find you and what you're up to?
Okay, well, like we were just saying, you can find me on the Twitter. I'm at One Questing Beast on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel called The Unspun Yarn, which also has a Twitter account now. I am brainstorming some upcoming content. I have a few ideas, a few irons in the fire, one of which would be the Butterflies of Noth and what's going on there. So there's been a lot of interest in that one. So that'll be in the upcoming weeks. That, as well as maybe an introspective look at the MCU, John's least favorite form of superhero. Hey, we can bring in X-Men too. I have a lot to say about X-Men.
I don't dislike it that much. You guys make so much out of this.
We have to, John. We have to tease you a little bit. About the Marvel verse. How about that? Is that a little bit better? As it pertains to my Twitter again, One Questing Beast.
And guys, you will find all that information right here on the page in the description. So and go with there. Oh, also, well, finish up, Nessie, and then I'll.
That's fine. I've already got my first content up on my channel. If you guys missed it last week, we did a deep dive on everybody's favorite Jolly Green Giant, Garth Greenhand, and I had some lovely guests on with me. Charla from Share the Music. Check her channel out. It's a music reaction channel. And fandom luminary, Crowfood's daughter, who is the resident expert on everything Garth Green. Had a lovely discussion with both of them, and I'd love to have them back on my channel again. We may do a part 2 on that, maybe discussing the children of Garth. So,
yeah, if you guys have not seen that video yet, go watch it. They had an absolutely amazing discussion, and it was quite a fun time. And subscribe to her channel and make sure that you're watching all of her future stuff, because it's going to be great. And and of course, we are both co-hosts on Here Be Dragons. For if we by chance have any new people watching who haven't seen our other stream, we do that with the absolutely amazing Stephen Stark, who was kind enough to bring us on as co-hosts some time back, and we talk about all number of geeky things, and I think we have a wonderful team, and I love doing that with you guys each week. And this coming week, he's actually going to be without us, because I believe he's doing, and I know that nerd.
Yes, he's got a wonderful guest.
Yeah, I won't spoil that, because I'm sure he'll want to announce that. But yeah, definitely tune in for that. And then, we'll be talking about a whole bunch of great stuff. I think we have a deep dive into Duncan Edge coming up.
Yes, we're going to actually do a Song of Ice and Fire content. Yay!
Which is crazy to think that we haven't done that before.
I know, because it's what brought us all together, was our love of George R.R. Martin and his wonderful works, A Song of Ice and Fire, and our love of Sir Dunk the Lunk. We stand. We stand. So yeah, we're really looking forward to getting into that. And hopefully we'll have some more content along those lines in the future. Any suggestions that you have for that, please look us up on Twitter. Leave a comment in the after the video. This is just as much about you guys as it is about us. So yeah, we're always glad to hear from you guys.
Yeah, actually, let me see, because I think Leaf said she was trying to post a link. I need to make a couple more people moderators, so I will get to that in due course. But let's, Nessie, if you want to drop a link in there so people can go right to it.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I can pull it up if you want.
I just have to pull it up on my phone.
Okay.
Just give me a sec. Go right ahead.
But yeah, so I was just going to talk real quick about what's coming up on this channel. Next week, I will be talking with my good friend Jared Kozal about the 2005 Joe Wright film Pride and Prejudice. And I know some of you guys are teasing me that you don't think it's the best version, but you know what? I am a Keira Knightley fanboy, so you guys are just going to have to, suffer through that. Jared and I share a lot of common interests, and I think that we're going to have a really great discussion about the movie. I think we both have kind of similar experiences coming to it, and it's just going to be great. And we will probably be talking about our sort of shared admiration, shall we say, of Keira Knightley.
Yeah, looking forward to that, John. Really looking forward to that. Looking forward to meeting Jared.
Yeah,
you've talked about him quite a bit, so
I just got to meet him face to face yesterday because we did a little test just to make sure everything looked good, and it was great.
Wow, cool.
We had a nice little conversation. And so we got that, and then the week afterwards, you and I will be back talking about Rome season 2, which is great because we kind of established the groundwork of who all the characters are, and so we might tackle that one a little bit differently, maybe go episode by episode and get into the plot details as they unfold. And hopefully some of you guys can catch up on the show by then. And, so you can all be engaged. That would be, I think just a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And after that, I have some stuff coming up, which I will hold off for now, but I've got some fantastic guests lined up to talk about some great movies. So hopefully you guys will enjoy. I'm actually totally flattered by the guests that I've got, because this is a new channel and I still feel like I'm such a newbie to the community. So it's just a treat to be able to have just wonderful people. I mean, just from the get-go, with having you doing this with me, I've just been so touched that you wanted to come on here. And then I had Stephen and Helen from my first stream, and now people that I haven't interacted with as much are willing to come on and talk some of my favorite movies with me. So it's just I think this is going to be really fun. And Padar, yeah, take a really bad film. Honestly, I could very well do this because I do have a couple of guilty pleasures. So I can talk about a bad movie and actually honestly enjoy talking about it too. So that might be on the horizon. We might do that. Stephen and I were joking, I think, about Masters of the Universe at one point. And, I don't consider that a bad movie. I think he does. But it's because I grew up with it. So it's probably the definition of a guilty pleasure, but the kid in me still loves it.
Yeah, it's all in where you stand.
Yeah, exactly. But so we've got all that coming up, and it's going to be so much fun. And again, thank you all for showing up. This was so much fun. I cannot believe we went for nearly 3 hours. That's great. But there was a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
And,
all right, guys. Well, thank you for showing up. John, thank you very much for having me. I've had a great time talking about this. It's, great conversation.
Yeah, it's great because I'm glad that you're as into this show as I am, that you enjoy it, and I think we had a fantastic conversation. So with that said, I think we will close down, and I hope to see you guys next week, just so long as you can put up with my Keira fanboying, and and we'll have a fun time regardless. So I'll see you then, and we will both see you 2 weeks from now. So thank you, and have a good day. Bye.
Bye.